Melissa Joan Hart, big star of Sabrina the Teenage Witch as a conniving Lolita. And then after this, another TV witch stars in Embrace of the Vampire. I'm talking about, of course, Alyssa Milano, star of Charmed. It's Buxom Teen Witch Night on TNT. And I'm Joe Bob Briggs, and we'll be discussing how to use magic to apply makeup and other tips for girls, while us boys will just watch Alyssa walk around in a low-cut white nightie. Coming up.
See Monstervision host Joe Bob Briggs next on TNT.
Joe Bob Briggs, and tonight, Embrace of the Vampire, the 1994 masterpiece in which the virginal but very hot Alyssa Milano plays a co-ed who the local vampire recognizes as the reincarnation of his old girlfriend. And you know what that means? Because what are the 7 most dreaded words in the history of civilization? Of course, you know what I'm talking about. I need to talk about the relationship. I finally got something going for a change lately, and then last week I get this message on my answering machine after a poker game that did manage to last 3 days. I return the call. We need to talk about the relationship. So I go, really? I don't need to talk about the relationship. We would include me, right? And she says, okay, I need to talk about the relationship. And I say, can you maybe talk about that yourself? Because as you can see, I'm a very mature individual. So we move to the next 7 most dreaded words in the history of civilization. I think you take me for granted. I have never known what this means, so I go, should I like send flowers or what? Is this one of those deals that can be cured with flowers, or is it going to take a 3-day massive emotional pain screaming and yelling marathon where nobody remembers anything they say, and it ends up being about how you can't stand dirty socks on the floor anyway? And she says, this is not about flowers. And I go, that's what I was afraid of. You know the only thing good about conversations like that? At the end of them, you always have great sex. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? And speaking of guys willing to die for great sex, the title character in Embrace of the Vampire has 3 days to get Alyssa Milano to dump her boyfriend and turn her into a vampire so they can spend eternity snacking on bisexual college kids. This movie has one of the most serious lesbian tongue locks that TNT has ever shown, so let's get it started. Here are those drive-in totals. We have 3 dead bodies, 10 very out-of-focus breasts, 2 Playboy Playmates, 2 lesbian soul kisses, 1 naked photo session, head bashing, sleepwalking, neck chomping, tongue biting, bloody door licking, gratuitous blue onk, vampire foo, slutty co-ed foo, 3.5 stars. Roll the film. Alyssa Milano as a virgin. What's the big deal about a virgin? Remember that movie Kids, where all these 2 guys do the whole movie is go around New York City trying to find virgins and deflower them? I mean, okay, yeah, maybe it's interesting for a while, but it's kind of like trying to memorize all the state capitals, you know? The entertainment value can only go so far, and then you're liable to think, just bring me a 40-year-old hooker, right? So we've got a vampire in a leather leisure suit with a red shirt and one of those obsessive boyfriends who, if he can't get you on the phone, decides he'll just come over. Girls always love that, don't they? And then he finds her splayed out on the steps in her negligee, but all he wants to talk about is, hey, when are we going to have sex, you know? He could at least say, gee whiz, how did you end up on the steps? Do you have Alzheimer's or something? But he's totally unconcerned. Anyhow, Embrace the Vampire reteams Alyssa Milano and director Anne Gurso of Poison Ivy 2 fame, but the real multi-talent in this flick is, of course, Martin Kemp, who plays the vampire. He was in that 80s band Spandau Ballet. Remember them? That song, I Know This Much Is True. Remember that? His acting debut was with his brother Gary in a movie called The Krays about these English gangsters who were twins. Great movie. We had it on this show. Or did we show that back when we were over at the movie channel? I can't remember. You guys remember? That was in 1990 that movie came out. Since then, he's done about a dozen B movies, including Embrace of the Vampire. So, okay, roll the ads. We'll get back. You remember Spandau Ballet, though. They were part of the New Wave with those bands Duran Duran, Culture Club, Human League, Soft Cell, Bananarama, Kajagoogoo. Stop me before I hurt myself, you know. You seen that new Winona Judd video? Have you noticed that with each passing year, Winona Judd and Boy George look more and more alike? I'm not kidding, I'm not kidding. You put them side by side, you'll say, oh, Boy George's comeback tour. No, Judd's reunion.
We'll be back with Joe Bob's Monstervision and Embrace of the Vampire after these messages.
Did you know that Embrace of the Vampire was financed by the founder of Penthouse magazine, Bob Guccione? When Alyssa Milano found that out afterwards, she was very irate, as she put it. She said she was manipulated. She doesn't mind flashing her hooters and making out with girls just as long as a pornographer isn't paying for it. And Bob Guccione's a great guy. I used to write for Penthouse. They even pay their writers a decent amount. Okay, the vampire's getting hungry, so let's watch some neck chomping after the ads. Alyssa's in that show now, Charmed, where she and Shannon Doherty use witchcraft to fight the forces of evil. But here on Monstervision, we remember where Alyssa came from, playing Tony Danza's kid on Who's the Boss, right? Was she Tony Danza's kid, or did she belong to the blonde woman with the big schnoz? And Tony Danza had to get romantic with the blonde woman while Alyssa was blossoming into a little fox right under his nose. I know how he must have felt, you know? I always end up with the girls who stood in the wrong line on makeover day, you know? And then the girl introduces you to her sister, who models for Iron Horse Biker magazine or something. You know, you get the Iron Horse, the sister models for Iron Horse.
We'll be back with Joe Bob's Monstervision and Embrace of the Vampire after these messages.
And now back to Embrace of the Vampire on TNT's Monstervision with Joe Bob Briggs.
That girl who plays the princess on the horse, that's Rebecca Ferrati. Voted Best Legs in Phoenix, 1984. Miss Belly of Palm Springs, 1985. Miss Physically Fit, Miss Cuervo Gold, and of course, Playboy Playmate of June of 1986. Here are the numbers, 34, 24, 34. Her ideal man is tall, dark, and believes in the Lord. Which reminds me, our text this evening is from Deuteronomy, the 12th chapter, where they talk about sacrificing pigeons and slitting the throats of rams and bullocks and oxen. And speaking of prime meat, we've got Playmate of the Month from July 1993 coming up now. Exotic beauty Charlotte Lewis. I don't want to give anything away, but this gal stood in line twice when they were giving out sex hormones, and she knows how to clean her plate, if you know what I mean, and I think you do. Okay. I'm surprised, since Bob Guccione put up all the money for this flick, that they're not Penthouse pets instead of Playboy Playmates. Playmates are actually more expensive than pets. Plus, in the old days, Playmates wouldn't even be allowed to work for Bob Guccione. It was in their contract or something, you know? When you sign up with Hef, he pretty much determines where and when those garbanzos are going to be sprung out of the chute, you know? For at least 2 years. The meat wagon don't stop unless Hef says, whoa, you know what I mean?
We'll be back with Joe Bob's Monstervision and Embrace of the Vampire after these messages.
Alyssa Milano is having a bad day, isn't she? Lesbian photographers teaching her to smoke and fondling her white knee socks. She gets a D in art history. Vampire sits behind her in class and embarrasses her. Her boyfriend gets jealous and obsessive, and she loses her crucifix. Do I feel a climax coming on? Indeed I do, after the commercials. I mean, not literally. I don't feel my own climax coming on, although they can sneak up on you. Usually not when you're drinking beer, though. Not that this is beer. This is Yoo-Hoo, the canned version. Ah, bottled Yoo-Hoo is for snobs.
We'll be back with Joe Bob's Monstervision and Embrace of the Vampire after these messages.
And now back to Embrace of the Vampire on TNT's Monstervision with Joe Bob Briggs.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the vampire just French kissed Alyssa Milano through a door. And I noticed Jennifer Tilly stopped by the set one day. Jennifer's in the movie for about 5 minutes as the femme fatale nympho vampiress Erica, who hangs around pool halls trying to have sex with the boyfriends of virgins. And then, of course, we had my favorite scene in the whole movie, the witch-slapping cat fight. And speaking of femme fatales, it's time for our weekly visit from my favorite postal employee, the lovely TNT mail girl. So, Rusty, how old were you when you gave it up?
What?
Come on, me and the 2 other people who are still up watching this movie want to know.
That is none of your business.
Well, at least you admit it happened.
Yes, it happened, of course.
Ooh. The bad girl side of Rusty is coming up. I like this.
I am not a bad girl.
Well, I don't see a ring on your finger.
It was nice and short.
What are you saying? You were married?
I never told you that. Well, here's an email. It's from Billy Walovich of Coralville, Iowa.
Ah, I don't think you're getting out of this one. We'll talk about this later. Billy Walovich, do you recall Christina Darding, who wrote from Indiana saying, "I won't watch your show because you insulted me and all the other overweight viewers"? As a young woman suffering from an eating disorder, I watch your show all the time, and personally, I think Christina is out of her gourd. She's knocked her noggin. You're supper, Joe Bob. You're super, Joe Bob. You can't never expect to air a show and please or displease everyone. Lots of support. Billy Walovich, Coralville, Iowa. Billy, I hope you meant that I'm super. It does say supper, but and not that I'm supper, because that would be some serious eating disorder. But thanks for the support, hon. And I try to be an equal opportunity offender because we're all handicapped, every last one of us. And by the way, anyone else who wants to show their support can write me care of TNT, 1010 Techwood Drive, Atlanta, Georgia, 30318, or email me at joebob@turner.com.
Or they can write a letter on the website.
Yes, that's right, tnt.turner.com/joebob. Okay, so what happened to the unlucky ex-Mr. Rusty?
You know, I have to get on with my route.
Really? Well, but we finally have something in common.
My worst nightmare.
Actually, we have two things in common because we're both wounded romantics. We're both bleeding from the cardiovascular area.
We'll be back with Joe Bob's Monstervision and Embrace of the Vampire after these messages.
And now back to Embrace of the Vampire on TNT's Monstervision with Joe Bob Briggs.
Well, there you have it. Spandau Ballet's Martin Kemp as the vampire who just sort of rolls over and lies there for 1,000 years, I guess. Why is it he doesn't chomp her neck at the end? Does he start feeling sorry for her? Is he one of those sensitive vampires? Or is there some kind of vampire rule that you can't bite her neck if she loves somebody else? I never heard that vampire rule before. Anyhow, I don't know if you noticed, but the composer for this flick is a guy named Joseph Williams. Now, I was wondering if he was related to John Williams, who's pretty much the most famous composer in life. So I checked, and Joseph is John's son. But never mind that, because he was also the lead singer for Toto for a while. It's like has-been bands of the 80s night here on Monstervision. All right, I want to let you know that next week, man-eating porcupine tumbleweeds with enormous teeth escape from a galactic prison and come to Earth and start bothering the family of D. Wallace Stone. Yes, that's right. It's Critters, the movie that asks the question, what's eating the American farmer? And that's it for me, Joe Bob Briggs, reminding you that when everything's coming your way, you're in the wrong damn lane. You guys hear the one about the guy who walks into a bar and sits down next to this very attractive woman? And he gives her a quick glance, and then he looks at his watch. And the woman notices this, and she says, "Is your date running late?" And the guy says, "No, I just bought this state-of-the-art watch, and I was just testing it." And the woman says, "A state-of-the-art watch? What's so special about it?" And the guy says, "Well, it uses alpha waves to telepathically talk to me." And the woman says, "What's it telling you now?" And the guy says, "Well, it's telling me that you're not wearing any panties." And the woman kind of giggles, and she says, "Well, it must be broken then because I am wearing panties." And the guy says, "Damn thing must be an hour fast." Joe Bob Briggs reminding you that the drive-in will never die. You didn't like that one? I like that one. All right, this 80-year-old woman is living at a retirement home. One day she goes into the men's rec room and she holds her clenched fist up in the air and she says, "Anybody who can guess what's in my hand can have sex with me tonight." Nobody says anything for a minute. Then this old guy in the back says, "An elephant?" She looks at him, she says, "Close enough."